Cool, thanks. This is the first time I've been to this Selenium Meetup, and it's exciting to be in a room full of people who are into it. I'm usually surrounded by people who aren't super into Selenium. But my name's Rio, and I'm the co-founder and co-CTO at Tint, a 35-person company with a green Selenium build. I've been a big advocate of Selenium at our company, and I just want to tell you guys how we went from no test coverage to a green Selenium build and almost gave up multiple times on the way. So to give you some background, at Tint we make social media display software. So you can see here, that's one of our displays at the Dubai Mall. But about a year and a half ago, we were just 5 engineers, and we were starting to close our first big deals with our largest customers. The problem was that our software failed on a weekly basis because our everyday deployments had no test coverage. You can guess that this resulted in a lot of angry phone calls. And with our product, you can only make a mistake a couple times before customers leave. So our company was teetering between failure and success, and instability was a make it or break it concern for us. So that's when we started on our year-long journey to get a green Selenium build. So when we started, our team had no resources or domain experience with Selenium. I had heard about it as something that can power integration testing, but we basically started with no previous knowledge. So we started out writing Selenium IDE tests like a lot of people do, but we weren't able to integrate them into our workflow because they required so much time to supervise. We switched to Ruby Selenium WebDriver and RSpec, and we were able to make some progress. But we definitely felt like we still weren't doing things the right way. And that's when we almost gave up because we felt like, hey, we're investing all this time into Selenium, but we're not able to actually have something that can reliably test our software. But luckily, we started asking some questions, and a couple things got us over the hump. One, Dave Hefner's resources with the Selenium Guidebook and Elemental Selenium really helped us organize our tests, and more importantly, helped us feel confident that what we were doing wasn't a waste of our time. And number two, we met Neil, who works at Sauce Labs, who helps customers with implementations, and we met him through a mutual friend, but he ended up just coming over to our office and providing emotional support and letting us know that it wasn't Selenium that was flaky, but it was actually our tests were written wrong. So that, I think those kind of social, non-technical things that jump in, really helped us in overcoming that hump, which was interesting. The next hump that we ran into was that we had no CI server and we were running tests manually. That got really painful, so we started setting up a CI server. So for about a month, I spent time trying to get our unique Ruby on Rails /PHP hybrid stack environment working on these CI as a service solutions like Travis, Circle, and CodeShip. And it took me a while for me to figure out that wasn't the right way to go, because every time I failed in trying to get our environment set up in these solutions, even though everybody was talking about them on Hacker News or other forums. So, I'd spent a month on this and I wasn't able to get our build server up, and everybody was like, hey, we got to ship some features. And we definitely got to the point where we were about to drop it all. But luckily, we discovered a couple things that got us over the hump, and those things were taking a step back and realizing that we were using the wrong tool for the job, and we were trying to use CI as a service solutions when something more configurable was really the best fit for us. So we finally got a build up and running, and we noticed that our Selenium build was still flaky, which was really upsetting because at this point it was 6 months in. And I'd spent a lot of time trying to get a build server up and promise the team that this was the way to go, and it had become sort of a joke that Selenium, wasn't going to solve our problems. But I did some more research and wrote a custom rerun script to rerun our tests, and that took our build from an unusable 50% flakiness to something that was like 10% flaky, which was actually usable. And once we had a consistently green build, we noticed that developers weren't paying any attention to it. So we integrated GitHub with TeamCity so that Selenium builds would kick off automatically. And developers would be alerted if their pull request wasn't was or was not breaking the build. So that took developer participation from about 30% to 100% almost overnight. The interesting thing about these things were that all these tasks were small things that we knew were best practices, but held off on implementing them because we didn't think it was going to be a game changer. But once we added them, we realized that it was a real mistake not to do it earlier. And although they don't relate directly to Selenium, they're essential in getting us to actually use it every day. The next hurdle we ran into was that we had a basic smoke test suite. It was up and running. It was green, and it was stable. But we had a lot of backfilling to do, and a lot of our test coverage was pretty minimal in big parts of our product. Nobody remembered to write Selenium tests with their PRs, and it was just a foreign behavior to everybody. Setting up an environment to run a test was cumbersome. Setting up an environment to debug flaky tests was super cumbersome, and we really struggled with that. And we reached a point where maybe there was too much pushback on the team to make adequate integration test coverage a reality. So we almost gave up at that point and settled with an okay smoke coverage thing, even though we spent a year setting it up. But we overcame that by discovering a couple key things that helped a lot. The first was just nudging people to actually write the integration test coverage and rejecting their code reviews if they didn't have it. Once people started getting used to it, people start writing tests. We also wrote a script to make it easy to run a Selenium test locally. So for a long time, we were debugging our tests remotely on Sauce Labs, and that was a huge pain. But once we got Selenium running locally, that was a huge step for us in actually making it easier for developers to run tests. We also set up we also worked with Neil to set up a unlimited usage plan on Sauce Labs, which was also big in changing people's mindsets in actually not feeling guilty in running the tests, because that really sucks when you have to pay every time you click build. And there's something psychological about that I think pushed us away from using integration testing as much as we could have. So these small behavioral nudges added up a lot in making writing Selenium tests a habit rather than a chore. So I'll finish up with a quote from my best friend from high school, who's now a software developer too at Slalom. But we were talking about Selenium, randomly, and he said, we had a Selenium suite, but it was flaky, so we stopped using it. That's one of the saddest things that I've ever heard, especially after getting so close so many times and then finally getting to the end. They gave up, and it really sucks. And the one message I want to say is don't give up. We spent a year working on our build on and off. I'm not a Selenium expert, but finally we got to the point where it's starting to yield benefit. And this is a picture of our build being green. So that's it. Cool. Any questions?
Yes. So a question about Team City.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've seen very few people using this tool.
Mm-hmm.
What was the reason? Why you didn't use Jenkins? What was any benefit of Team City which you especially needed in your case?
Yeah, to be honest, it was because a person had previous experience with Team City, and they just had domain experience, and it made it easy to set up. We're a pretty small team, so we didn't have as many resources, so we sort of relied on what we had knowledge in.
So you have to pay for license, I guess.
Wait, say again?
It's not free. Team City is not free.
Team City is free if you don't have many agents. I think it's like 3 agents for free. Yeah. So, go ahead.
Yeah, when you said that they said that your tests were wrong, what do you mean by that?
That's a good question. I think when I came into writing Selenium tests, I had assumed that it would be one way to do things, but what I discovered was that sometimes with Selenium tests there are certain ways to do things incorrectly, where things will work like maybe a couple times, but they'll fail a couple times, and then techniques to make them run better. If you search like Selenium like test examples or look them up on Google, a lot of times you'll see like bad examples. And so in the learning process, we were copying and learning from bad examples, and what helped a lot was using those resources to figure out what the good examples were.
Can you give like one example?
Yeah. Can I give one example? One example is like we used a lot of sleeps in the beginning, and now we've ripped those out. So, yeah.
And then the other question I have is when you were doing the integration testing, presumably if you're using Selenium and you're operating at the UI level, have you considered operating at like the API level?
So right now for us, we're using RSpec, and since our API is on Rails, all of the API stuff is on using RSpec to test that instead of Selenium. Yeah. Any other questions? I think we're out of time. Okay, cool. Very much.